Max had always felt out of place in high society settings, but this gala was different. The usual nerves about rubbing elbows with people in suits were amplified by the sense that something was off, like the room was holding its breath. My name is Max, and I'm 38. I live in a city where the sky is constantly covered in a blanket of ambition, and everyone's either climbing or getting left behind. I'd been married to Ariana for 7 years, and I thought our lives were as smooth as they could get. Successful business, a nice house, the whole package. But tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I stepped into the venue, I immediately felt the sharp glances of a few people, quick but pointed, like they were all in on some secret I wasn't privy to. It didn't take long before I noticed Ariana laughing with Victor Laru, a man I'd known for years, someone I'd even done business with. But this time, something about him seemed different. Ariana was leaning in a little too close to him, her laugh a little too warm, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in years. I couldn't help but stare at the way Victor's hand brushed against the small of her back, the way she didn't flinch but instead leaned into his touch. My stomach turned, a slow realization creeping in. I walked up, the sound of my footsteps like a drumbeat in my ears. I'd been ignoring the tiny flashes of doubt over the past few months. Ariana's increasing distance, her late nights at work, the excuses she'd come up with when I asked where she'd been. But now, seeing her so at ease with Victor, everything clicked into place. "Hey babe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could hear the edge in it. "Mind if I steal you away for a second?" Ariana turned to me, her smile faltering for just a split second before returning to its practiced warmth. "Max, you're being silly," she said, her tone light, as if I were overreacting. Victor shot me a glance, a smug grin forming on his lips as he sipped from his glass. His eyes lingering on Ariana, just a beat too long. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Something was happening between them, and it wasn't just a passing moment. I crossed my arms, refusing to let the situation slip away. "I don't know, Ariana. You and Victor seem pretty cozy over here," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Her eyes flashed with annoyance. "It's just a conversation, Max. You're making a scene." She waved a dismissive hand at me, like I was the problem. "Victor's just an old friend. You need to lighten up." Victor chuckled under his breath, leaning in to add, "Yeah, man. You should relax. You're lucky she's even paying attention to you right now." His tone, though casual, held a sharpness beneath it, like he was daring me to do something about it. My heart raced. A knot of frustration formed in my chest, tightening with each passing second. "Lucky?" I repeated, my voice low. "What exactly does that mean, Victor?" I stepped a little closer to him, but Ariana was already interjecting, her voice cold. "Max, stop! You're embarrassing yourself," she snapped, cutting through the tension like a knife. "It's just a party. Let's not make it dramatic." And with that, I felt the weight of it, the truth of what was happening between us. It wasn't just an affair. It was something more calculated, something that had been building for longer than I wanted to admit. Ariana wasn't just pulling away from me. She was already building a life with someone else. Victor was more than a casual fling. He was the man who'd replace me. I couldn't help but feel the growing distance between us, the quiet space where I once mattered. It wasn't just that Ariana was dismissing me, it was that she was so comfortable doing it in front of me, in front of everyone. I turned on my heel, my mind already racing. This wasn't something I could ignore anymore. It wasn't just the affair, it was the fact that she had already moved on without telling me, and I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see it. The drive was aimless, my hands gripped tightly on the steering wheel, knuckles white, my thoughts in a tailspin. Every corner I turned only seemed to bring me further away from something I couldn't put my finger on. I should have gone home, faced Ariana, demanded the truth. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I figured out what this all meant, what I had just witnessed, what it meant for us. The road blurred beneath the headlights, the streetlights flickering like the thoughts in my head. Betrayal. That's the word that kept echoing. I'd suspected something was off, but tonight, seeing Ariana with Victor like that, it felt like a punch in the gut. I didn't know how long I drove or where I was going until I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour gym. The neon lights buzzed overhead as I killed the engine. My chest tightened, my throat constricting as if I were suffocating. I slammed the door shut and stormed inside, the cool air of the gym doing nothing to calm the heat surging in my veins. The heavy bag hung in front of me, swaying slightly, waiting for me to take out every bit of anger, frustration, and pain I couldn't voice, couldn't make sense of. I had no plan, no strategy, just fury. My fists collided with the bag, each punch a chaotic explosion of emotion. The sting in my knuckles matched the burning in my chest, and still, I didn't stop. "Come on, Max, hit harder," I muttered to myself. My body was moving on instinct, slamming into the bag with no care for the damage it did to my hands. The sweat poured down, mixing with the taste of salt from my tears I refused to acknowledge. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe without feeling that hollow pit of emptiness threatening to swallow me whole. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. I had been a fool, a goddamn fool, and the worst part, I hadn't even seen it coming. When the fury started to slow, my breaths labored, my chest heaving. I collapsed onto a nearby bench. I wiped the sweat off my brow, my body trembling, not just from exhaustion, but from the emotional roller coaster I was trapped in. I was a wreck, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I remembered the tablet. Ariana had left it on the counter this morning. I hadn't thought about it then, too distracted by the events of the day. But now, I knew I had to look. With shaky hands, I dug my phone out of my pocket and dialed my home security system app. A few taps later, I was in, watching the security footage of Ariana walking out of the house that morning. She didn't know I had access to it, didn't know I was following every movement like a shadow on her trail. But it wasn't the footage I was after. It was the tablet. I drove myself back home after that, still reeling, knowing exactly where it was waiting for me on the kitchen counter. Ariana must have been too distracted, too careless. The tablet was unlocked, and the first message I saw nearly made my stomach drop. "I miss you. Can't wait to see you tonight." I stared at the screen, reading the exchange over and over, each word slicing through me like glass. The messages between Ariana and Victor were casual, flirty, but then there were the plans, the planned trips, the meetings. They weren't just physical, they were orchestrated, executed like they'd already built a life without me. One message stuck with me more than the rest. "We'll make sure Max doesn't suspect anything. It's easy to hide behind the perfect marriage." I couldn't breathe. The anger flared again, but this time, it wasn't just rage, it was realization. This wasn't just about an affair, it was a strategy. Ariana was planning something, and I wasn't a part of it anymore. I was the fool who thought he still had a place in her life, in this marriage. The weight of it hit me like a ton of bricks. What did I even know about our life? What did I know about her anymore? I stared at the tablet screen for what felt like an eternity, but there was only one thing on my mind now. This wasn't just betrayal. This was the beginning of something else, something darker. And I wasn't going to be passive anymore. I was done. The next morning, I couldn't shake the image of Ariana and Victor, her laughter lingering in my ears. It wasn't just the affair. I was beginning to see that Ariana's betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. This wasn't a simple mistake. This was part of a calculated strategy, and I was the one being pushed aside. I had to see it for myself. I followed Ariana quietly as she left the house that afternoon, her bag slung casually over her shoulder. She didn't notice me tailing her, or maybe she didn't care. She drove with Victor's voice still echoing in my head, taunting me. He was playing a game, and I was the pawn who had no idea he was already losing. She took the highway, and I kept my distance, watching her car turn into a small, upscale wellness retreat about an hour outside the city. It was the same place she'd gone to a few weeks ago, her business trip that I'd never fully trusted. I had a bad feeling about it then, but seeing her drive in today, with the knowledge of what was happening between her and Victor, sealed everything. I parked a few blocks away, my heart pounding in my chest. I waited. I couldn't let them see me. My mind was a mess of thoughts, none of them coherent. But I knew I had to keep my cool. This wasn't just about what I'd seen at the gala. This was about everything that had been building up, all the things I'd ignored, the lies, the manipulation, the way Ariana had been slowly replacing me without a word. I waited for nearly an hour, my eyes glued to the entrance of the retreat. Then I saw them, Ariana and Victor, laughing together as they walked through the front doors. Their carefree demeanor made it clear that this wasn't a mistake or a one-time thing. They weren't hiding anything. It was a secret they were living openly. I stayed in the car, barely able to breathe, but I kept my eyes trained on the door. I watched as they disappeared inside the building, and for the first time in weeks, the weight of what had been happening hit me full force. This wasn't just an affair. Ariana wasn't just stepping out on me. She was building a life with him, a life that excluded me entirely. I had been nothing more than an obstacle in their way. Victor had his hands in everything, subtly taking over the place I thought I held in Ariana's life. I grabbed my phone and started recording. The footage was undeniable. I zoomed in as they emerged an hour later, their conversation light, almost flirtatious. Victor's hand casually rested on Ariana's thigh as they climbed into his car. The image burned into my mind. It wasn't just the physical closeness. It was the way they interacted, like they were already a couple, and I was the one who no longer mattered. As they drove off, I sat frozen, the realization settling in. I wasn't just dealing with a betrayal of love. I was watching the end of everything I'd built with Ariana, and I wasn't going to let this continue without a fight. I made a decision right then and there. I wasn't going to be passive anymore. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to tell me what was happening. I was going to take control. If Ariana was going to make her choices, I would make mine, and they wouldn't be silent. The hours following my discovery felt like an endless blur. I couldn't stop the images of Ariana and Victor replaying in my mind. They were together, not just physically, but emotionally. They were building something I hadn't been invited into, a new life where I didn't exist. I couldn't let this go, not just for me, but for the years I had invested in a marriage that now felt like a house built on sand. I had been blind, but I wasn't going to stay that way. I spent the rest of the day gathering every shred of evidence I could find. Ariana's tablet was only the beginning. I scoured our shared devices, combed through old receipts, hotel bookings, everything. Every detail I could find that painted the full picture of her betrayal. I was meticulous. I took notes. I cataloged everything. From the messages between her and Victor, to the irregularities in her finances, the discrepancies in our business accounts that I had ignored before. My heart pounded as I pieced it all together. Victor had been involved in more than just the affair. He had his hands in our business, using Ariana's influence to siphon money and manipulate deals. The deeper I dug, the more I realized the extent of the lies, the webs they had woven. This wasn't just an affair. This was financial manipulation, corporate corruption, and I had been a pawn in their game. But I wasn't a pawn anymore. I was taking control. I called my lawyer, Cassandra Bell. She was the one person I knew I could trust, someone who didn't care about the drama, someone who was sharp, focused, and knew how to fight dirty when needed. She picked up on the first ring. "Max, what's going on?" "I need you to help me expose everything," I said, my voice cold, calculating. "Ariana's affair with Victor is the least of it. She's been using her position to hide financial crimes, manipulating contracts, funneling money, the works. I've got proof." There was a beat of silence on the other end. "This is big, Max. Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure. I need to end this marriage, but not just with a divorce. I want everything out in the open. I want her to pay for what she's done." "All right, I'll start gathering the paperwork. We'll take this one step at a time." I sat back, staring at the pile of evidence in front of me. It felt like the first real step in reclaiming control. No longer would I sit back and let Ariana dictate the terms of my life. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I was going on the offensive. The plan was simple. Expose her for everything she had done, but do it in a way that would make sure I came out on top. Not just as a man wronged, but as someone who was now in control. I wasn't going to let this break me. This was the first strike, and I was going to make sure it hit hard. I smiled to myself, the first glimmer of relief I'd felt in days. I was no longer a passive husband, caught in a web of lies. I was a man taking back his life. Ariana returned from her so-called business retreat with the same practiced smile she always wore. She breezed into the house, her expression cool and composed as if nothing had happened, like everything was perfectly fine. The same smile, the same rehearsed tone when she greeted me. "Hey babe, the trip was so productive. We've got some great things in the works." But I wasn't fooled anymore. I knew the truth, and it was time she did too. I walked over to the table, where I had already prepared everything. The folder I had been putting together over the past few days, messages, receipts, hotel bookings, screenshots, and footage of her with Victor, was neatly stacked and ready. I could feel the weight of it, the truth sitting in the folder like a heavy weight that had the power to crush everything she'd carefully built up around her lies. Ariana's gaze flickered briefly to the folder as she walked past me, but she said nothing. Her smile stayed firmly in place as she dropped her bag onto the couch. "I've been waiting to talk to you about this," I said, my voice firm. I wasn't going to back down. This was it. I was done being the passive husband, the one who let things slide. Ariana stopped mid-motion, her smile faltering just slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice suddenly laced with a tinge of caution. I pulled the folder toward me and placed it squarely in front of her. "You can act like everything's fine, Ariana, but I know what's been going on. I know everything." She raised an eyebrow, glancing down at the folder before meeting my eyes. For a moment, she didn't speak, just stood there, her expression unreadable. I could almost see the gears turning in her head as she calculated her next move. "Well, this is a little dramatic, don't you think?" Ariana said finally, her tone cool, almost dismissive. She took a step back, folding her arms across her chest. "I don't know what you're hoping to achieve with all this, but it's really not necessary." "You think this is dramatic?" I asked, the anger creeping back into my voice. "You've been seeing Victor for months. It's not just about the affair anymore, Ariana. It's the lies, the manipulation, the way you've used me, and now I've got all the proof." I pushed the folder toward her. She hesitated for a moment before slowly flipping it open. As she glanced at the contents, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her breath caught slightly. "Max, you don't need to do this," she said, but there was no warmth in her voice anymore, just cold detachment. "I know you're upset. You've always been so dramatic when things don't go your way." My heart sank at the indifference in her voice. She wasn't even sorry, not even a little. "This isn't about me being upset," I said, my voice quieter now, but every word hitting harder. "This is about you not caring about what you've done. You've been lying to me for months. You've been planning your escape for even longer." She didn't look at me. She just skimmed the pages, her fingers moving slowly, almost lazily, over the evidence I had so carefully collected. She didn't react at all, not a flinch, not a word of defense. She simply flicked through the pages like she was reading some mundane document, completely unaffected. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, she closed the folder with a soft snap and looked at me. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said coldly, her voice empty. "This whole thing is just a misunderstanding. I was going to tell you everything, but you wouldn't have believed me anyway. You've always been too controlling." I stared at her, my chest tight with disbelief. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had sacrificed so much for. And now, here she was, dismissing everything I had discovered as if it didn't matter, as if I didn't matter. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You were never going to tell me anything. This was all part of your plan. You just didn't think I'd catch on this soon." She sighed, as if bored with the whole thing. "Fine. You want to make a big deal out of this? Go ahead. But don't think this changes anything. You'll be fine. You'll get over it. You always do." Her words hit harder than any punch. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even acknowledging the damage she had done. She was just brushing me off, as if I were some inconvenience in her life. I stood there, frozen, as the weight of the truth settled over me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was something worse. Ariana had already moved on. She was beyond this marriage, and I had been nothing more than a stepping stone in her plan. She didn't care. She never did. I took a deep breath, the finality of the moment clear in my mind. "I'm done," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but every syllable carrying the weight of a decision that had been building for far too long. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something. Peace. Ariana's divorce filing came as no surprise. I had expected it. In some ways, it was almost a relief. I wasn't going to be the one clinging to the wreckage of our marriage. But her next move, demanding full custody of Bruno, our dog, was calculated and cruel. It wasn't enough to tear apart everything we'd built. She wanted to strip me of the one thing I had left, the one source of comfort I had in the midst of all the chaos. Bruno was my anchor. Every morning when I woke up to his wagging tail, I could feel a sense of normalcy, something real in the midst of everything that had unraveled. To Ariana, though, it wasn't about the dog. It was about control. She wanted to hurt me, and she was willing to use the courts to do it. I couldn't let her take Bruno from me, but I wasn't just going to fight her in court. I had a bigger plan now. With Cassandra's help, we had meticulously documented everything: the affair, the corporate fraud, the manipulation of business deals, the lies. I had receipts, messages, GPS data. Every detail was carefully logged, every piece of evidence put together like a puzzle. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was taking the fight to Ariana, and I was going to win. I made sure to keep my moves calculated, never revealing my hand. I wasn't about to let her think she had the upper hand. The media fallout started quickly. Cassandra knew the right people, and I had the right information. As soon as we filed my countersuit, an extensive dossier that exposed everything, Ariana's world started to crumble. It didn't take long for her corporate sponsors to distance themselves from her. The articles started flooding in, detailing not only the affair, but also the fraudulent dealings I had uncovered. Victor's involvement became public, and with it came a suspension from his high-profile position. The scandal was too big to ignore. In the end, Ariana's image, the one she had worked so hard to cultivate, collapsed under the weight of her own lies. I felt a sense of vindication, but there was no real joy in it. I hadn't wanted this battle. I had wanted peace, but I had to fight back. I had no choice, and in doing so, I had not only exposed her deceit, but also reclaimed my power. As the public attention shifted from Ariana to the consequences of her actions, I was able to quietly move forward with my own life. There was no fanfare, no drama, just the slow, steady progress of rebuilding what had been broken. And through it all, there was Bruno by my side, the one constant in a world that had turned upside down. The days after the divorce felt surreal, like I was living in a world I didn't recognize. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer the man who had lived in Ariana's shadow, trying to hold together something that had already fallen apart. Now, I had nothing but time and space to rebuild. My business, once just a small operation I'd kept running on the side, began to take off in ways I hadn't imagined. Word of mouth spread, especially after the fallout from the scandal. People saw me as a man who wasn't afraid to expose the truth, someone who wouldn't let the wrongdoers get away with it. My work began attracting clients who valued integrity over the showy success that Ariana and her corporate friends had lived by. And I wasn't just building my business, I was building myself. The first few weeks after Ariana left were difficult, but as time passed, the pain faded. What replaced it was a growing sense of purpose and fulfillment. It was as if I had found my true calling, my true self. I had finally stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't, trying to fit into a life that wasn't mine. In the quiet moments of my work, with my hands covered in grease and the hum of machinery in the background, I found peace. Bruno, my loyal dog, was always by my side, his steady presence offering a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been missing. It was a simple life, but it felt real. No fake smiles, no empty promises, just me, my work, and the bond I shared with Bruno. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pretending. And the business, it grew. Clients trusted me not just because of my work, but because they could see I wasn't trying to play the game anymore. I wasn't pretending to be the polished, perfect businessman. I was the guy who could fix things with his hands, the guy who knew what it meant to work hard for a living, who had fought through the mess of life and come out stronger for it. I started getting offers from investors who saw potential in what I was doing, something I never would have thought possible before. But I wasn't interested in chasing the big bucks. I didn't need their approval. I had already found what mattered. I had found my own path. The lessons I had learned from Ariana's betrayal weren't lost on me. For years, I had been content to live in her shadow, letting her define my worth. But now, I saw the world differently. I wasn't just the guy who got left behind. I was someone who could carve out his own future. And that future was finally in my hands. With each passing day, I realized how much I had grown. No longer bitter or angry, I felt proud. Proud of the man I was becoming, proud of the life I had built, and proud of the choices I had made to reclaim my power. It wasn't the life I had envisioned when I married Ariana, but it was better. It was mine. Bruno and I would walk together every evening, enjoying the quiet peace that surrounded us. The past had become a distant memory, and the future was wide open. And as I looked ahead, I saw not just the work I loved, but the man I had become. A man who no longer needed anyone's validation. Someone who had learned to trust himself again. The world was mine to build, and I was going to build it on my terms. A year had passed since the divorce, and life had moved on, in ways I never expected. My business was thriving, my mind was clearer, and the weight of the past felt like a distant memory. But then, one morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Ariana. "Hey Max, I know it's been a while. I'm sorry for how things ended. Can we meet? I need to talk to you." I stared at the message, my mind spinning. An apology? From her? It was cold, distant. No warmth, no real remorse. It didn't even feel like a genuine attempt to reconnect. Just some scripted message that couldn't possibly mean what it should. But curiosity, maybe a sliver of unfinished business, had me agreeing. I chose a cafe on the edge of town, somewhere neutral. It had been over a year since I'd seen her, and yet I could already picture her walking through the door. The same confident stride, the same practiced smile, as if the past year hadn't happened. When she arrived, nothing had changed. She wore the same aura of self-assurance, her eyes scanning the room for me. She spotted me instantly, her lips pulling into that familiar tight smile as she walked over. "Max," she said, her voice too sweet, too rehearsed. "It's good to see you." I stood up, but the words didn't come right away. I had spent so many nights imagining this moment, how I would feel when she finally tried to make amends. But now, in the reality of it, all I felt was indifference. "Sit down," I said, motioning to the chair across from me. She sat, crossing her legs, that same calculated look in her eyes. I could see it now. She was still playing a role, trying to pull me back into the life she had so easily discarded. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," Ariana began, her voice soft, but with an underlying edge of control. "I'm sorry, Max, for how things ended, for how I treated you. I was confused, but I regret hurting you." Her words stung more than I expected, but not for the reason she thought. I didn't need her apology anymore. The version of me who would have craved it, who would have believed her, was gone. That person no longer existed. "Don't," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Don't apologize. Not now, not after everything." Ariana blinked, her smile faltering for the first time. "Max, No," I interrupted. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to come back and pretend like you care. You're not sorry. You're just trying to smooth things over, to get me to forgive you. But I'm not the same guy you left behind." She looked at me, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "You never cared about me," I said quietly. "Not really. You wanted the image of a perfect life, and I was just a piece of that. You used me. And now, you want to reconnect, to pick up the pieces of your old life. But I've moved on. I'm not that guy anymore." Her face went cold. "So, this is it? You're just done?" I didn't flinch. "Yeah, I'm done." The silence between us felt thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was final. There was nothing left between us. No love, no hate, just the remnants of a past I was ready to walk away from. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to her. I had already found my peace. She stared at me for a moment longer, her lips parting as if she might say something, but then she closed them, nodding slowly. "I guess I deserved that." "Yeah," I said softly, standing up. "You did." As I turned to leave, she didn't stop me. There was no last-minute attempt to pull me back, no plea. It was over. And as I stepped out of the cafe, the air felt lighter, like I was breathing for the first time in years. I had walked away from the past, and I was finally free. Max wasn't the man Ariana had loved, and now I understood that he didn't need to be. The last year had been a whirlwind. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about life, had been thrown into disarray. But as the months passed, I started to rebuild. Not just the business, but me. The man I had been before, trapped in a relationship that defined me, was gone. And in his place was someone stronger, someone who had learned to trust his instincts, to embrace his own worth. The business had taken off in a way I never imagined. It wasn't just about the work, it was about the authenticity I brought to it. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore, no more pretending to be something I wasn't for the sake of appearances. My clients valued integrity. They could see that I wasn't just another businessman looking to climb the corporate ladder. I was someone who had built something real, something that stood for hard work and honesty. The phone calls and emails kept coming in, new opportunities, new partnerships. It was everything I had dreamed of, but this time, it was on my terms. I didn't need the fame or the approval that Ariana had once wanted for me. I had built something that mattered, something that felt like me. And through it all, there was Bruno. Every evening, we'd take our walks through the neighborhood, side by side. There was a quiet comfort in those moments, no distractions, no drama. Just me and the dog, the steady rhythm of our footsteps, and the soft evening light filtering through the trees. Sometimes I'd catch myself smiling for no reason at all. I had found peace. I wasn't bitter anymore. I didn't need to hold on to the anger. Ariana had played her part in shaping me, but she no longer defined who I was. My past with her had taught me a lesson in resilience. The wounds had healed, leaving behind scars that reminded me of my strength. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. As Bruno and I walked into the future, the noise of the past seemed to fade further away. My business was booming. More clients, more investors. The vision I had once kept to myself was now a reality, and it was flourishing in ways I never imagined. I was finally free, and that freedom tasted sweeter than I could have ever imagined. Looking ahead, I realized that the future wasn't defined by the life I had left behind. It was wide open. It was mine to shape, and I would make it count.